Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's travel vlog, we are going to be going to two of the most beautiful palaces in Portugal. Let's go.
First in today's vlog, we are going to the National Palace of Queluz. This is located about 20 minutes outside of Lisbon by public transportation, though we had a private car and drove here from Coimbra. It is located in the Sintra municipality and the greater Lisbon area near the Portuguese Riviera. If you do travel here by public transportation, it will be about 20 minutes on the train and then another 15 to 20 minute walk from the station. We took our car though, and we were able to get parking outside of the palace, no problem. Work on Queluz National Palace began in 1747. It is designed in the Rococo style and is sometimes referred to as the Portuguese Versailles. Originally, the palace was intended to be a summer retreat for Pedro of Braganza. He was the brother of King Jose I. Jose and Pedro were the children of King John V and his wife Maria Anna of Austria. Pedro of Braganza later became king consort of Portugal as the husband of his own niece, Queen Maria I. Icky, I know. I mean, obviously with these European monarchies, you hear a lot about their incestuous marriages.
Still though, the uncle-niece thing was definitely not common. How very Targaryen of them.
But basically the reason this happened is because Maria I, she was the eldest of the four daughters of King Jose and his wife Mariana Victoria of Spain. They had four daughters, of which Maria was the eldest, like I said. It was Maria, Mariana, Dorothea, and Benedita. So they had no son to inherit the throne, and Portugal had never had a ruling queen before. Jose thus decided to ensure that his daughter's rule would not be greatly opposed. Why not just marry her to my brother, because he's the next male in line for the throne? Then we can unite their claims and hopefully people will be happy. So you guess you can kind of see the logic behind that, but still kind of gives you the ick, doesn't it? Also, apparently the eldest son of Maria and Pedro married Maria's sister, Benedetta. So that's an uncle-niece marriage and then an aunt-nephew marriage. I guess we're lucky that Benedetta and her nephew husband never had kids, because genetically they would have been in trouble. The National Palace of Queluz thus became a residence of Pedro and Maria, and it is extremely beautiful. As you saw in those clips, there is an entire room dedicated just to all of the china that the Portuguese royal family owned. Several of their children were born at this palace, and their son, John, who later became the King of Portugal, also lived here with his wife, Carlota Joaquina of Spain. After Pedro's death, Maria began to suffer from mental health problems, and so Queluz became effectively her gilded prison. Her son ended up ruling as regent while she was mentally ill until she eventually died and he ascended to the throne as King John VI of Portugal. There seems to be some debate about what caused Maria I's mental deterioration. It happened after the death of her uncle husband Pedro. Even though she was 25 and he was, I believe, 42 at the time of their marriage, they got along well, and so it's possible that losing him caused her mental health to suffer. She showed symptoms of major depressive disorder, and seeing as two of her sisters also had mental health problems, it's possible that her incestuous ancestry caused these problems. Maria was actually treated by Francis Willis, who was the same physician who attended the King of Great Britain, George III, during his periods of mental instability. Queluz was also the birthplace and death place of Pedro, the grandson of Maria I. the son of John and Carlotta Joaquina. He was known as King Pedro IV of Portugal and Emperor Pedro I of Brazil. He had more liberal political ideas, considering traditionally it was an absolute monarchy, and he ended up abdicating his titles, leaving the Empire of Brazil to his son and the Kingdom of Portugal to his daughter, who became Queen Maria II. He ended up dying of tuberculosis at Queluz in the Don Quixote bedroom, as it is known. We will see a portrait of him on the wall here in a second, followed up by the room where he passed away. Another interesting thing about Pedro is that he was married twice. His first wife and the mother of his children was Maria Leopoldina of Austria. His second wife was Amalie of Lechtenberg, who was actually the granddaughter of Empress Josephine, the first wife of Napoleon. Here we have the bedroom where Pedro passed away. The palace was truly beautiful, with so many stunning interiors and many rooms to explore. Another great thing about it, there were very few people there. There was one tour group who we let go past us. We saw a few other groups, but honestly, most of the time we were alone in the rooms. We had plenty of time to just walk around and look at things for as long as we wanted. It was really a pleasant surprise to be in a location that had so few tourists. There are also very beautiful grounds that you can explore too. It was a beautiful day while we were there, blue sky, just absolutely a wonderful day to visit the National Palace of Queluz. Interestingly enough, actually the royals who lived in this palace, they had the river diverted so they could have a canal, and they would ride up and down this canal in a gondola with a servant to, steer the boat, and they would just ride up and down the canal as rich people with plenty of time on their hands do, and they would have their musicians come out to play for them on the boats or in their little, what's the word that I want? Pavilion, their little outdoor music pavilion. And that's really crazy to think about, that they did all of this just so they could ride around in their gondolas. But I guess when you're royalty, you can indulge your whims like that. Who's gonna stop you? You're in charge. You have unlimited funds. Any crazy idea you can think up, you can do it. It's good to be rich, isn't it? But the palace was absolutely beautiful. I can see why they call it the Portuguese Versailles. And it was so nice to be here with so few people around and on such a beautiful day. I would highly recommend going to the National Palace of Queluz if you're looking for something to do in the greater Lisbon area. And it'll be easy to get there via public transportation, so even if you don't have a car like we did, you can get there for a day trip. We really had a lot of fun. This was one of the highlights of our vacation, and I'm glad that there were some details in each room to tell us a little bit about what we were seeing. I personally like to learn about the people who lived in a place. I find that royal history very interesting, and there was lots of stuff to learn. Next up, we went to Pena Palace in Sintra. That's what I was telling you in that clip, but you can't hear me. You can just hear all the people around me in the line chatting. According to my mother, this is the most visited site in all of Portugal, and it is considered one of the 7 wonders of Portugal. I have to say, even though it was crowded, I think it was totally worth it. This was the attraction I was most excited to see in Portugal. It is so beautiful with its mountain views and colorful towers. It is definitely cold up there though. I wore my skirt that day and I regretted it. I should have worn my pants because when we were on the windward side, oh man, it was cold. Definitely dress for the mountains when you visit the palace. There was originally a chapel to Our Lady of Pena on this site, then a monastery, but the monastery was completely destroyed during the 1755 Lisbon earthquake. This man, King Ferdinand II of Portugal, ended up having the palace built on this site. Ferdinand II was the husband of Queen Maria II, so I guess that makes him the great-grandson-in-law of our friends Maria I and Pedro of Braganza. I was very curious as to why Ferdinand II got a regnal number when he was just the husband of the queen, so I googled it, and apparently it was Portuguese custom that a prince consort would be gifted the style of king once his wife gave birth to a male heir. That was very interesting to me because obviously in other monarchies, I've never heard of the queen's husband being given the title of king. Ferdinand II of Portugal was the son of Prince Ferdinand of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha and his wife, a Hungarian noblewoman. The senior Ferdinand converted to Catholicism from Lutheranism. Now, if you're out there thinking to yourself, Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, that sounds familiar to me. Well, I'll tell you why it probably sounds familiar to you. Ferdinand II of Portugal was actually the first cousin of Queen Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Ferdinand Sr. was the younger brother of Albert's father and the older brother of Victoria's mother, who was also named Victoria. Therefore, Ferdinand II of Portugal was first cousin to both Victoria and Albert, and he was also the nephew of their shared uncle, Leopold I, King of the Belgians. Ferdinand II was Maria II's second husband? I just said second many times. Her first husband had died only 2 months after arriving in Portugal. Together, Ferdinand and Maria had 11 children over the course of their marriage, 3 of whom were stillborn and 2 of whom would become kings of Portugal. Maria died when she was 34, shortly after giving birth to her 11th child. Her doctors had advised her to stop having children due to the risks and also due to her obesity. However, Maria ignored their warnings. Apparently, she simply responded, "If I die at my post." She was known to be a very kind ruler who did what she thought was right and was nicknamed the Good Mother. After Maria II died, her widower ruled as regent for their underage son. Ferdinand II would also later remarry to a Swiss-American opera singer. Elise Hensler, who would later become Ferdinand II's second wife, was born in Switzerland, but her family moved to Boston when she was young. As a young woman, she was performing at La Scala in Milan. At the age of 19, she gave birth to an illegitimate daughter, allegedly fathered by a Milanese nobleman. Later, she was singing at the opera in Porto, and that is where she caught the eye of Ferdinand II. They bonded over their shared passion for sculpture, ceramics, painting, architecture, and gardening. Elise was also a photographer in the palace. There are photos that she took of her husband Ferdinand II and his son Prince Augusto. Of course, the relationship was scandalous because Elise was a civilian, and it was considered very scandalous that she had a daughter out of wedlock. Ferdinand was determined to marry Elise. However, shortly before their marriage, she was granted the title Countess of Edla by Ernest, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, Ferdinand II's first cousin and the elder brother of Prince Albert. So it seems like Ernest approved of the relationship at least. Now, the Countess of Edla, she lived with her husband at Pena Palace, and he left it to her in his will. The Countess would continue to live there, but she eventually sold the property to her stepson, King Luis I of Portugal. Luis I was never supposed to be King of Portugal. He was the second son of Maria and Ferdinand, but his elder brother, King Pedro V, died of cholera in 1861. Cholera also killed their two younger brothers, John and Fernando, so 3 brothers all died of cholera in the span of 2 months. As king, Luis married Maria Pia of Savoy, the daughter of the King of Italy. However, Luis was a womanizer, and that strained his marriage to Maria Pia. They did have 2 sons together, however, and eventually Luis contracted syphilis. This progressed into neurosyphilis, and he died a very excruciating death. On a lighter note, he was known to be a lover of literature, which I guess is nice. He was a fan of Shakespeare and introduced the first Portuguese language versions of Shakespeare to his country. Luis was succeeded on the throne by his eldest son, who became Carlos I. Like his grandfather, Ferdinand, Carlos was interested in art, and in Pena Palace they have hanging some tapestries that he himself actually made. Carlos married the French princess Amélie of Orleans. Amélie had spent her life in exile in England after the French royal family was overthrown for the second time. Carlos I was a patron of science and arts. He was also extremely interested in oceanography, and he went on explorations with his yacht named Amelia after his wife. However, he would die in 1908 at the age of 44, killed in what was later known as the Lisbon Regicides. Carlos I was traveling with his wife Queen Amélie, as well as their 2 sons, Luis Felipe, the Prince Royal, and their younger son, Manuel. They were shot at by 2 revolutionaries with Republican sympathies. Carlos I died pretty much instantly, while Luis Felipe, who was also hit, lingered for a while longer. His younger brother Manuel, who was shot in the arm, tried to stop his older brother's bleeding. However, Manuel's handkerchief was soon completely soaked with his older brother's blood. 20-year-old Luis Felipe passed away. Since he outlived his father by 20 minutes, you could say that he was king of Portugal for those 20 minutes, making it one of the shortest so-called reigns in history. Queen Amélie was not shot, but when the attackers jumped up on the carriage, she attempted to fight them off with the only makeshift weapon that she had, her flower bouquet. The 2 assassins were shot dead by police shortly after the attack, and an innocent bystander was also killed by police in the commotion. Thus, the young Manuel became King Manuel II of Portugal, but his reign did not last very long. He was overthrown, and he and his mother, Queen Amélie, planned to go to Porto to see if they could drum up support. This is a picture of the 2 of them outside Pena Palace. However, they discovered that it was too dangerous to go to Porto, and thus together they went into exile in England. Manuel II did get married, but he had no children and died relatively young. He was the last monarch of Portugal. I know this is a pretty depressing story, but on a lighter note, it was very interesting to learn about all of these people at the palace. One of the issues I did have when I was in Portugal is that very few of the attractions had historical information or descriptions of what we were looking at. I was very happy that the National Palace of Queluz and Pena Palace in Sintra did have some information about the royals who lived there, and I enjoyed that very much. I don't know a lot about Portuguese history, but it was interesting to see these sites and learn a little bit about some of the people who inhabited these castles. Though Pena Palace was crowded, I highly recommend it, and I have to say, it was probably my favorite thing I saw during my entire trip to Portugal. It was absolutely beautiful and very interesting. There were a lot of people there, but it was not as bad as I feared, and I felt like I did have plenty of time to see everything that I wanted to see as I walked from room to room. So everyone, that is it for our trips to 2 beautiful palaces in Portugal. I will have a Lisbon travel vlog coming soon, so subscribe to the channel if you want to see that as soon as it is released. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed. It really does help my channel grow and reach more people. My social media links are also in the description if you want to follow me on some other platforms. I really appreciate you being here today, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Bye! I'll see you again next time.